you in the audience that they may have recognized who the individuals are. So we'll just go to item 2, approval of the January 11th, 2024 committee meeting minutes.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. All right. Item 3, citizens' opportunity to address council members on stormwater or other public work issues. Don't think we have anybody signed up. All right. Moving to item 4, new business. Item A, city county sales tax projects, funds, and BIP application. High Street Viaduct. David Bain. Good morning.
Good morning, thank you. So we have a memo that was in the packet basically talking about our city-county joint projects and where we stand with those. And so, and then also how that applies to a grant that we're looking to apply for the High Street Viaduct. And so starting with that, there is a grant application out. It's called the Bridge Investment Program, BIP. And so it could provide as much as 80% grant, 20% match for the bridge project, which would include both the construction and then also preliminary costs such as design and other features. And so that grant application is actually submission is due on March the 19th. And so we were looking for the council to proceed with a resolution that would allow us to apply for that grant. We're estimating that the matching funds for that would be somewhere in the neighborhood between $2 and $3 million. And so that's kind of the first part of that, but then a report on where we stand with some of the other projects and their costs. So the Capital Area Rail Terminal, originally the city-county agreement for that project was $800,000. I think there was the hope that there would be some state funding that would go along with that didn't materialize. And so right now the cost of that project minus the other grants that had been received is $2.144 million. The Wildwood extension, we're continuing that project and continuing the design. There's some costs that have increased due to some redefinition of the floodway and the bridge that's needed over Wares Creek. And so that project, which had originally been thought of as being a $3 million project, the estimate for that now is somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 million. The Monroe Street project, again, was another one of the projects that we have an agreement with the county on. And that project had originally been set up at $800,000. And we're thinking perhaps now that could be as much as $1 million.
And that's what we're calling phase 1. That's a highway to basically to Duncan Street.
Correct.
Through Duncan.
Yeah, through Duncan. The included a signal and then some transition on the far side, the south side of Duncan. And so what that leaves us with is perhaps a slight issue with cash flow, in so much as we've probably collected about $6 million worth of funding within the joint city-county sales tax projects. Since we're about halfway through that sales tax cycle, we've collected about half of the funds, or at least half of the funds have been assigned to that account. And so just between CART and Wildwood, now I think Eric had made mention to me yesterday that there is $500,000 worth of safety funds that the county has to bring to Wildwood, so perhaps that number instead of 5 million could be 4.5. But nonetheless, those two projects together exceed the 6 million that we currently have available to us. So there's probably some decisions that need to be made as to how to proceed with that. And certainly Monroe Street, we wouldn't have the funding to proceed with that at this time. The High Street Viaduct, as I understand it, the resolution could identify those funds as being joint city-county funds, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be in possession of them at the time. And so I do believe that we could proceed with that resolution and application, simply having identified those funds as future funds. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, that was kind of dropped in or at least in my lap yesterday. And when I read the memorandum, I was very concerned once you got to your position of being concerned about the cash flow. And from my perspective, I think we have to be very cautious of if we don't have the identified funds currently right now, pushing that off to future identification. So I'm glad our finance director's here. Sheila, do you have anything to add to this at all, or?
I mean, I guess the other option would be to realign the priority of the projects that have already been identified. That would be a council decision.
I would say on that grant application, this is it's not a sure thing you get in the grant for sure, for certain. And many times, many communities have put their hat in the ring multiple times to finally get a grant. And so getting that application in, I think, would be a good thing to get it in there. They'll critique it, give us feedback if it, say, it isn't approved. We could get lucky and it might be approved, but if it isn't approved, they'll critique it, give us feedback that we can maybe modify a little bit and go at it again. And that's what a lot of communities have done. They've been successful over some period of years of doing this, but and so, the grant procedures that the city has is what we're talking about really here is this is such a large one that, locking that money up, I don't know would be the wisest thing either, but I totally get not wanting to move.
We would have
Commit
the
yourself later, yeah.
right, we would have the right to refuse.
Yeah, you could refuse it at the time too.
And that would be the process, would be this is just for approval to apply.
We're applying.
We would not obligate or have to obligate any funds until the application was actually approved and the grant was awarded. So at that point, there would have to be some discussions about how to come up with the matching and how to realign other projects.
And I guess, I think most of us on this committee tries to be forward thinking of being able to lay out a plan to, if we were able to get that grant to us, I don't want to be behind the 8 ball of, okay, now we got to immediately find it. So I think we need to go through some exercises of looking at that. Now, we committed like $1 million to the viaduct. So that has been spent how? So it's kind of.
That money is apart from a slight bit of it that we spent when we did the emergency repair, when we had the hole in the deck. The majority of that money is still sitting there available.
It's $1 million.
Slightly less than $1 million.
The ARPA, non-ARPA, whatever
money.
we call it. So yeah, that's not inclusive in that number there, right?
Yeah, that money would be in addition to the money that's shown there. So there is.
Is that million?
So we still
there is
basically have $1 million
that's-
in reserve for the viaduct to be spent accordingly.
Correct. And all these are estimates, except probably the cart thing, right, Eric? That's what I'm thinking. And the cart isn't quite finished, but it's getting
Pretty
close.
firm number on the cart. The wildwood, we think we're high on that estimate. We're hopeful it comes in a lot less. And again, we have $500,000 that the county had used of some safety improvement monies, so that will reduce that number.
I think the main thing,
We have not requested reimbursement on the cart yet. David, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we've even asked for the 400 of the original 800, is that right or not?
No, I think we have.
You did?
I think we have
Okay.
transferred the 400.
So, there might be an opportunity for us, if cash flow, if we can float it to the next year, if we gotta move some numbers around just to make it all work out to where we don't have to put something on hold, but we'll have to go back and look to see if that's gonna work.
What's the timetable on receiving feedback on the grant?
Rachel, had
I was
you?
thinking, yeah,
I
late.
think it's September is what their should be for.
And back, the cash flow is kind of the big, one of the, if kind of the project, because we've talked about all kinds of projects, Monroe, or Madison Street, we've talked about Stadium and Jefferson, and we kind of moved on from those. And so, we have the design essentially on Monroe Street, and I know the county's very close on the Wildwood. But that $7 million is the cash flow issue today. We can delay the Monroe Street a year, I guess. We have to because of the cash flow, but if our bid comes in pretty high on Wildwood, then we're really gonna have to have a discussion on how we cash flow all that this early in the sales tax.
one thing about Wildwood, it'll be a 2 construction season project based on how it just has to play out, so there's some ability to float some things.
And the county holds that contract, and I think they do it a little different. I've been up there at meetings where you've been able to delay parts of contracts for trucks and various things to the following year. We don't typically do that at the city when we write the contract, but since they're holding the contract, it's a little different, so we'll have to work with the county. We just wanted to alert you of the issue, number one, because if we come back all of a sudden after we get this bid and, everybody's hair's on fire, we just want to be upfront about it, that, there could be a cash flow issue. And then also, we've been targeting Monroe Street for this summer. But, with that cash flow, I'm not sure it's gonna be feasible unless we really get in the city and county's cash flow and really juggle things about that other people, we might have to borrow. We could, if it's available, we'd have to work with Sheila to say, well, are the, for example, not that this is the example, the thing, but if police has a big allotment of money, but they're not gonna use it for 2 years, can we move that around, or something like that? That might be possible, but I'd have to.
I'm not comfortable, I'll let the committee speak for themselves. I'm just not ready to commit to a strategy here yet from this meeting.
Yeah.
Even though we need to have that submitted by March, correct?
Well, it'll have to go to the council agenda
By March the 4th.
the 4th, which is, a few weeks away, but we wanted to get the issue out there, so it's kind of a rush application.
Well, we'd like to vet them and give signal to the council that we've done our due diligence and that they can feel comfortable with the recommendation, but until some exercises are done with our finance committee and some conversations, I'm not ready to push that. Anybody have any other concerns or comments regarding that? Councilman Lester.
Well, it sounds like that we have capability to adjust for cash flow from the discussion we've had here. So, and there'll be sounds like extra time just for the process to go through as far as this is for making the application. So I really wouldn't have a problem with approving for a resolution. I guess I'm also thinking we set aside a good bit for street overlay, and I think that it was over a couple of years.
Well, we already spent half that this year, and then we have the other half going in 2024.
Right.
Which was $900-some thousand.
But again, I would think that's potentially, because that goes out through the year, potentially some of that is for advance. But
Again, I think this is a prime example of why we really need to extend the capital improvement sales tax from a 5-year iteration to a multiple 15, 20, 25-year option. Any other further discussion? Councilman Schwartz.
What is the source of funds for this grant? Is it MoDOT or the bridge funds?
It would be federal dollars that come out of the latest federal transportation bill.
So who are we applying to? The federal government?
Correct.
That's it? Any other? I don't want to speak on behalf of the whole committee, so Councilman Lester.
I would move this forward for a resolution.
I would second that. I don't have a problem with it. Just to get our ducks in a row.
I think it just needs to be discussed in the full body. We have a lot of work to do.
Sheila, and staff, you guys can coordinate and get some in-depth discussion and.
Yeah, we'll work through Brian and
Recommendation.
everyone. Try to come up with a plan.
Councilman Lester has a motion and.
Second that.
Second, okay. All right. Let's do a roll call on that, please.
Deacon,
Aye.
Lester,
Aye.
Spicer,
Schwartz.
Aye.
Spencer.
Aye. All right, item B, ARSI change order for asbestos services. Mr. Helming.
So we are coming before the committee basically to request a change order to our standing contract for asbestos abatement that we have with the company RC. We have a couple big projects. They're going to cause us to exceed our current contractual limit. So really what we're requesting here is to extend the authority for that contract to be able to spend up to $150,000. That's going to include the abatement that we are currently doing for the MSP site for the Saddle Tree, but it's also going to include the abatement for the News Tribune location as well. We expect that to be a little higher than the MSP site, which was around, I think, $9,000 to $10,000. So in fact, I think we have a total there of, I'm not sure what that was, I forget.
110,
It was 110,000, I think. Currently was the not to exceed estimate for the asbestos abatement for the News Tribune. So we're asking for send this to full council for a change order to extend our contract for authority to spend up to that for those, generally for those two projects, and that should leave enough left over also for any types of smaller projects we do for demolitions, which is typically what that contract was done for. So be happy to answer any questions.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
So we don't have it on here particularly, I don't think, but on the next council agenda with that change order, the source of funds, the big source is parking fund to pay for the major abatement at the News Tribune out of that change order. But also we have a repair contract that we finally have going out on the parking deck on Jefferson and a little bit of work on Madison if we would choose to do that. And then what was the other thing? The actual demo of the building after the abatement's done. So none of that money's actually in the budget, it's set in the fund balance. So we would have a supplemental appropriation out of that fund to pay for all those things. And it's a pretty big number, time you get it all said and done. So I think it'd be pushing $1 million.
Just short of $1 million.
So everybody's aware of that. That would have to fund that major part of that contract he's talking about.
That was my next question, I assume that would be the case, so thank you for clarification there. Is that an action item you want a recommendation from this body?
Yeah, we'd like to go ahead and do that so we can take that to council here.
Great. We'll do a roll call vote on that, please.
Do we need a motion and a second?
Oh, well, yes, sorry. My apologies.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second that.
Deacon.
Aye.
Lester.
Aye.
Spicer. Schwartz. Spencer.
Aye. Okay, item C is wastewater biosolids GMP contract. Mr. Seaman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So we've got a PowerPoint pulled up. Wanted to talk about the progress on this project. So the equipment we use for the biosolids, that dates back to the 1990s. And just to kind of catch us up, we applied to the state revolving fund for some loan money in February of 22, and then in April we got a voter approved bond issue to help fund this, and the state put us on the intended use plan in October of 22. And then last year in February we got the approval to do the phase 1 of a design build project. So these design build projects, you get to go a little bit quicker. So we're back a year later with some design and some quotes. So we think we're ready for the next phase. And just to try to summarize what this is. So we produce 3 products, if you will, at the treatment plant. There's the inorganics that come out, the treated clean water that goes to the river, and then this addresses the sludge that we apply to the fields. And so the old system that's, much of it dates back before the 90s, but we're still operating the same equipment we put in 1997. So it's not just the equipment's out of date and antiquated. In these days, we're concerned about SARS and COVID and things like that. So if we upgrade the equipment, we can protect worker health as well. So that's one of our goals. The result of the phase one work that Burns McDonald's done, so we have a guaranteed maximum price of $12,693,100, and contingencies within that are up to 6%. And so as you'd expect, all the local subcontractors did very well in their part of this. Burns and Mac's not ready to talk about those. They're still negotiating terms and things like that. So we're not quite ready to say who's all in the project. And then also, we could probably have it all in operation within 15 months of starting. So some busy information here. This the work is primarily at the south end of the plant. So the south building along Mocaine Road is here, and this would be adjacent to it. And then this is a isometric drawing. If you will, the business, it comes in and is pumped in to some centrifuges, and they dewater it. It'll be dropped down into a conveyor, and then we'll add some lime and some other chemicals, and then we take it out to the fields, and it's applied at agronomic rates. What we're wanting to ask and get approval for is to proceed with a loan and then a construction contract. So the amount of the loan, we can build that from the phase one cost we've already spent is about 1.2 million. The proposed phase two cost we just discussed is about 12,693,000. DNR would like us to estimate about, let's see, it's 3% for loan closing, so that's 348,000. So it's the approximate value would be 14.3 roughly. And so this is like a construction loan for a new house. You only borrow what you need. So it's at the end, the loan will only be sized to what is required. And we've got that 12,693,000 represents the guaranteed maximum price. So we have the hope to perhaps be less than that. And what we like about the state revolving loan, of course, is the really cheap interest rate. So that's quoted recently about 1.8% for 20 years. So we like to use that. We've also are on the intended use plan for a Westview pump station later in the year. Perhaps we can be ready to do a second loan on that. Our schedule, we would be ready by February 20 for a phase two design build contract, and then also to sell bonds to the state revolving loan fund to get that low interest loan. The state's saying that they're maybe not quite ready yet, so we're kind of representing the earliest we could go. They're saying we might delay a meeting or two. So that's kind of where we're at. We've got some folks on the line. Burns McDonald are listening in too. If we've got some questions I can't handle, but if you've got any questions, be glad to ask.
Any questions this morning?
So I just want to add that this was all in our rate case, our rate study, and all these costs to pay these loans back, and that's how we utilizing these low interest loans is keeping our rates down, but yet doing all these projects through wastewater. So Eric's been, and Burns and Mac have been good about getting this work done for us. So this is one of our primary projects in that whole rate table the council instituted, I think, over a 7-year period. And we're in year what now? I can't remember, three. I think we're in year 3 of it. So anyway, yeah, we're moving right along in the wastewater side.
All right, well, appreciate the information. I think,
So we'll
other
be,
questions?
with this group's nod, we'll be bringing this forward when we get final approval out of DNR and things like that. So does that sound acceptable to the group?
Absolutely. Any other information on this section? Because I think you have part of the next section. Yes, I entertain a motion.
I second that.
Roll call, please.
Deacon.
Aye.
Lester.
Aye.
Spicer. Schwartz.
Aye.
Spencer.
Aye. Item D, emergency home repair program, sewer laterals.
If I could just tee this up real quick, as Scott and I have been talking, our Councilman Spencer and I have been talking about, what are alternatives maybe for people who are facing lateral repairs, especially, this occurs mainly in older neighborhoods. It's hard to say. I actually just talked to somebody the other day after we had talked, and their lateral traversed another property that, didn't have an easement, they didn't really know, and then it finally got out to the street. And so, it comes in all shapes, sizes, forms. We do have some programs for that, but not, there's not any, they're all different, so each one would be a different case, I'll say it that way. So anyway, asked Eric, and ended up Rachel has some things here as well that could help folks in her program. So that's how we got here with this topic.
Yeah, I appreciate you adding this on to the agenda for us. Thank you.
So I guess Matt kind of hit on it. So building drains are the responsibility of the property owner. And so Jefferson City being an older town, we've got a huge variety of things. So we kind of made an illustration of some of the things that occur. So a lot, being in a hilly town too, there's some houses that have multiple laterals that are connected to the sewer. And then also, Matt kind of mentioned too that there are service lines that serve more than one building as well and more than one property. So the city, we do maintain the sewer mains, about 470 miles of that in the city and county. Those are generally 6 and 8 inch sewer mains. And but all these collector lines that serve individual houses and maybe multiple houses, there's just a huge variety of those. So just looking at other communities, we're not unique, really. Roughly 90% of all the municipalities have the same policy that we do, that's the property owner's responsibility. So we have identified some help for folks. So there's preventative insurance plan through American Water Resources. So that would be a partner with Missouri American Water Company, and they offer it to folks who aren't even their customers. They've offered it out in the water districts as well. So the policies are quoted right now about $5.49 to $16 a month. That $16 appears to cover gas lines and things like that as well. So there's a website that we've linked to on the agenda. Another program that we've got is so if an old house needs to get their plumbing up to code, replace the lateral, we've got a backwater rebate program. So that wasn't required, years ago, but it came into the International Plumbing Code probably about 30 years ago. So if they want to take that step and get in compliance and protect their property, we offer a rebate for that. We reimburse the property owner. And then there's the Emergency Assistance Repair Program. So if folks are low to moderate income, this is something that could qualify for that. And we've got the extra room, Ann's here, and Rachel as well. So we could discuss that too if you got any questions.
Any questions? Councilman Deep.
It's not a secret, but there's a number of houses, probably quite a few, that are still on septic systems. Is there a program to help them get attached to the main system or redo the septic? Because I know a few houses, at least out in the east end, that, 500, 600, 700 yards from the main, so it's almost cost prohibitive to connect onto them. Is there a program to help with the new septics, or?
So, yeah, the city doesn't administrate things to help with the on-site systems. They could, there are probably some programs they could get into from Farmers Home and Rural Development. The only program we really have is the sewer extension program. We've talked about that before, and that's, it's not so ideal. The customer still pays for every penny of it, and if we finance it, so it hasn't been very popular.
But it's available, and there's a financing mechanism that basically you can borrow. I think it travels with the property is the way I would describe it. It's I don't know if tax lien is the proper word, but you basically finance it on your property note, and if you were to sell, then it just keeps getting paid as the property sells to the next person. But that's an option too for some of these things. So it's a wide variety. I know it's not all inclusive, but the insurance thing was really interesting, and I think our city administrator had some experience with it. I think he mentioned to me that he's aware of some folks that have taken it out and utilized it. And it doesn't cover everything, but it does help, and it is fairly low cost. So if you're the main word is if you are in an older area of the city, you're probably going to have to update your infrastructure like your roof and everything else, or your electric panel. And these can be costly. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Just depends. And there are a few programs that help with that. So that's kind of our background. And I know Rachel could explain I think that there have been some sewer laterals done with this program, is my understanding.
About 2 a year.
A couple of years, he said.
Any other questions? Is there necessarily an action item on this? It's just.
No, I just, you and I talked about it. We wanted to, kind of publicize what's available, folks, if they can be glad to talk to people about it.
Is there a tab on our website that kind of goes into these different programs? Our website's pretty.
Yeah, there's a blue bar that runs, and there's a star that has funding opportunities, and it has all of our grants that we have available for different programs.
But I would encourage folks in older areas of town to investigate that insurance policy, and I wasn't aware it was that cheap, and now it doesn't pay for everything. You got to look into it, but I think it might be if you're in an older area of town and you aren't sure of your lateral, talking to your plumber about it and looking at that program might be a good idea.
And they can contact the city and find out exactly where, their responsibility starts and ends.
Right.
Where it's handed off.
And the plumbers are really good about, our licensed plumbers in town are really good about, they know the rules on this and explaining it to folks, and we work with them a lot, and that's through not only us and Public Works, building inspections as well.
All right, any other questions? Okay, we'll move to item E, microtransit RFP. Ms. Ann, good morning.
Morning. All right. I was asked to come talk to you. I'll give you a little bit of an update on the RFP that we're working on for microtransit. So we are moving forward with, and we've decided to do the RFP process because it just really gives us a wider span of, what vendors are out there, what they provide, what ideas they have, things like that. So we are working on a bid document, and it's going to be a request for proposal. And, I don't know if y'all are real familiar with all of our different types of bids, but we do a proposal because it gives us room to negotiate. It gives us room to work with, our top bidder, our top 2 or 3 bidders, however many we want. We can go back to them with their proposals. We can, ask clarifying questions. We can ask, hey, what if we, did this instead? How would that affect your bid? But we can kind of work with the vendors to help them give us the best proposal to us. So then ultimately, the city has a very good product. So that is the route that we're going, is the RFP process. It really, sometimes when we go back and negotiate, it works to our benefit. We get better services, usually at a lower price. A lot of times a bidder will come back and lower their price when we say, we're giving you an opportunity to do a best and final offer. So that's what we're going with. So this RFP will be for microtransit services and to help supplement some of our fixed routes. We think we will still maintain maybe 3 to 4 fixed routes and then have microtransit services supplementing those services. We are also going to allow bidders to propose paratransit services for us, maybe in whole, maybe in part. You know, just kind of, we're just gonna let them propose what they think is best, what they foresee they can do. And again, we can always go back to the bidders when we get these proposals. We can, ask questions. We can ask them to modify things, anything like that we want to until we get to our final proposal that we like. Anticipated release date, we were thinking it was going to be like the last week of February, first part of March, but we have learned that this has to be approved by MoDOT first, so we may have to bump it back a little bit. I'm not sure how fast MoDOT will be on their approval process. We will do a pre-bid conference. It'll be via WebEx, or if some vendor wants to come in and be here in person, they can do that too, but I think doing a pre-proposal conference is a good idea. It will allow vendors to ask us questions, things that maybe we haven't even thought about yet that we need to provide to them. Because really, the more information we can provide to them, the more questions we can answer, the better proposal we're going to get. And if we don't do a pre-bid proposal or pre-bid conference, we will probably get flooded with lots of emails and lots of questions that we're answering, one here, one here, one here. So let's do it all at one time. Bid submittals. So the proposers, we're going to ask for several different things from them. We're going to ask them to tell us about their qualifications. Their method of performance is going to really be one of the biggest areas. How will they provide the services for us? What does that look like? What's the implementation? We're going to ask for references. We'll ask for a cost proposal. All the kind of the normal things that we ask for in any RFP. We will also allow vendors to propose more than one solution. So if they say, hey, we can give you exactly what you've asked for, here it is, but then we could also do, like maybe they would throw in the paratransit or something else. So if a vendor has more than one solution they want to propose, they can propose more than one solution. We will have an evaluation committee that will evaluate this. We'll look at cost, experience, and qualifications, staffing, references, capability and approach to the scope of work, their timeline, implementation, all those kinds of things is what we're going to look for when the evaluation team goes through this. And an evaluation team has not been set up yet, so I do not know who those people will be. And then within our scope of work, we're going to identify what the contractor is responsible for. What are their duties? So we will provide some background information and data. We'll go over what the contractor requirements are. And usually they're things like, you have to have at least 5 years of experience in this field, things like that. You have to have the capability and the financial backing to perform this contract. We'll also look at other requirements that the contractor has to do, like they have to know that they have to provide all equipment and materials and staff. They have to provide and train their personnel. They need to provide a marketing plan. They need to provide some technology solutions and a mobile app that residents can use. They need to have a call center and customer service so people know how to make their calls, how to get their rides scheduled and things like that. They have to provide and maintain the vehicles. They need to have various methods for accepting fares. Customer management functions, who are their riders and what kind of database do they have? One of the most important ones is they have to be able to provide reporting back to us, because then we need to take that reporting and provide it on to the FTA. And then we are also asking that they provide us assistance with grant funding. So those are kind of the high-level items that we're looking for. We'll go into more detail of kind of each one of those. And then we will ask vendors to provide us with, all the documentation that supports what they can do. They will know what the evaluation criteria is, so they should provide us enough documentation that we can evaluate those items, and then they'll provide us a cost proposal. And so that's kind of where we are with the RFP and what we anticipate including in the RFP. So I'll be happy to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
I assume this is a continuation of the long-going discussions and meetings about redoing our transit system. This is part of it?
Yes.
Okay, good. You guys have worked hard on it. And we really appreciate it because it's been long overdue.
Yes, that's what we're trying to get to.
Councilman Lester?
So for contract coming out of this, eventually, the funds that would be needed would be from transit fund?
Yes.
There's a couple things here, and that's why, going through MoDOT is important to make sure they're in agreement. And so that would be anticipated that they would be part of our operational grant process. So right now, that's a 50-50 type grant, 50 local, et cetera. One thing that Jerry just learned 2 days ago, I think it was, at a conference with MoDOT, a compliance conference, is MoDOT's actually getting ready to do the same thing and will include us in that. And so it's interesting that here we are putting this together and they're doing the same thing. So it seems like we probably ought to do both approaches in my mind. And they may just say that when we submit this over to them. I'm not sure what their feedback will be, but they did. Jerry can elaborate. I wasn't there, but they're basically putting one together statewide, which is what other states have done. So they're getting caught up here. So that's really interesting. So it sounds like they're going to be supportive of these kind of things in the future. So that could help us.
Well, it's obviously a model that's worked well in other communities, and myself and former Councilman Glenn Costales have been talking about trying to improve our accessibility and just make general improvements with our public transit. And we like the microtransit model. We've had a citizens group with full participation on this, and so we're anxious to see what comes of this. And we're excited. There's been a lot of work behind this.
And I would say Angela's here. Sorry, back there. She's still here. Out of that meeting that Jack mentioned, there was another offshoot group formed, and we, at the conclusion, we said, well, we'll start funneling that through this committee, but keep them in the know of what's going on. And so, we make sure to invite her here.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Leanne. All right, item F, sustainability partners, capital funding. Mr. Molman.
Thank you. So the city has been approached by a group that they take a different approach to capital improvements funding. So essentially what we have is a financing mechanism. And the model that this group called Sustainability Partners uses is infrastructure as a service. So essentially, different types of public infrastructure are built by this group called Sustainability Partners, and then the city will pay use payments as the city uses it. And so it's kind of just a different way to get certain types of capital improvements built. And why we're here today, what they like to do is they like to enter into what's called their master utility services agreement. And then once that's a formal relationship between sustainability partners and the city that says, if we do a deal, this is what it will look like. This is kind of how the order of operation will be. But no commitments are made until you enter into sub-agreements for any type of project. So if we wanted to build a building, we would have no obligation to do so until the project is completely modeled out and there's terms and construction specifications. And so really what this is, what we're asking for here is the opportunity to explore kind of alternative financing opportunities with this group called Sustainability Partners. So it's a little bit different model than what we do, where we find a funding source, you know, a giant chunk of money, we commit it to a project, and then we build it, and then we maintain it. This is kind of operating a different model where they build it, they maintain it, and then we make regular payments to the group based on how much the infrastructure or facility gets used. And so what we're not asking for is a commitment of any type that we are going to do X, Y, and Z project and that this is the way this is going to work. What we're asking for is the opportunity to enter into this master utility services agreement. And so that way Sustainability Partners feels comfortable enough to expend some resources on any potential project. And then the city would then have the opportunity to say, yes, no, we want to do it this way. No, we don't want to do it this way. So just kind of wanted to get any feedback from the committee, answer any questions. I don't think we have any particular time frame on this, but I do know that there are at least some projects that the city administrator is interested in at least exploring of this being a possibility. It's just hard to start talk turkey essentially with this company, because they have some resources that they bring to bear to do the modeling that they don't really want to do on spec. And so, like I said, we would like this committee to kind of either A, if you have any questions, B, you know, say, okay, we're comfortable with at least exploring this, or, you know, okay, this isn't anything that we're interested in. I know that's a very high level explanation, but essentially the best way to think about this is an alternative financing mechanism. And so we would bring a resolution approving an agreement to the state council, but that agreement would have no financial obligations. It is an agreement that if we enter into future agreements, the agreements would operate in X, Y, and Z manner. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
With the example that you gave, a building, is it new building construction, or would there be a chance to remodel existing buildings, make additions to?
From what I have been able to observe, this model works best for new construction. I think if you were to ask the party, the company, that they are able to do kind of remodels, my best guess is that they would be best operating with large remodels as opposed to, you know, an AC unit or, you know, redoing the council chambers or something like that. But larger, I think they work better on larger projects.
Well, the first one comes to mind is the police department.
Yeah. I think that could be something that could work. There's lots of kind of examples, and so when you are doing larger projects, that's where this seems to be their wheelhouse, is larger projects. So I think something like that could work potentially, but of course the devil's in the details on stuff like that. But yeah, it's just kind of a different mechanism, both on financing and then on ultimate ownership. So like I said, this is mostly to give the opportunity to explore.
On new construction, who would own the building?
So the way that it would work is that the company would own the building.
They would be on the tax roll, correct?
That's an interesting question, because the city would have an exclusive right to use, and that may impact the value of the, that would impact the value of the taxable interest. And so maybe, but probably not in the exact way that you were thinking.
Then if the building no longer is useful, is the city responsible for it then, or does it go back to?
So they would be the owners of the building, but it's the way it kind of set up, it's mutually beneficial to continue the relationship because in these types of situations, the city would be the landowner, but the private company would be the improvement owner. And so those types of things are symbiotic a little bit. And so the exit mechanism is essentially a buyout. So you figure out what's the fair market value, and then the city would buy out the interest based on the current fair market value. So it's not really a situation where either party can walk away. You have to cleanly sever the relationship.
Councilman Lester?
How long has this group been in business doing this?
Yeah, I don't think we have any exact numbers, but we certainly have some project examples that date back.
That's what I was wondering, also about projects that you've looked at that they've done.
Yeah. So kind of their flagship projects are with the University of Hawaii and some large parking structures with them.
I would need to go see that firsthand.
I think you need legal counsel to join you. So large institutions that you would recognize the names of. They only deal with they call them durable entities, so municipalities, universities, sewer districts, that type of thing. They are a Delaware Public Benefit Corporation, which limits their ability to essentially the projects that they can take on by their own corporate charter have to be of a such that have a public benefit. So it's a different type of business model that's organized in the state of Delaware, but they're just not a private organization. They have some duties to ensure that the projects that they are undertaking and that the capital that they are spending has a public purpose.
So I'm saying that I guess that allows them to get special access to funding that only those type of entities, public entities, could do.
Yeah. So their funding mechanism is quite interesting. So essentially the way they're built is they're not looking for rate of return. Their investors are institutional. And so what they are looking for is yield. And so that's kind of how they can operate on a model that makes sense for durable entities like municipalities. And so it's less about, hey, I need to make 20% back on this in 10 years. It's more about, I need to create 4% yield for the next 50 years because my investor is a pension fund. That seems to be the difference in their access to capital markets is that they're not looking for people that are in the stock market. That's not how they operate. Their investors are institutional who say, okay, I need to create a source of revenue that will last, the next 50, 70, 100 years because I have, 6 generations of pensions to pay, or, whatever the case may be.
It's sustainable.
Yeah.
Councilman Short?
Yes.
So what's the difference of this versus Howerton building a building and us leasing it from them?
So it's the rate of return. So essentially their rate of return is based on useful life. And so those rates of return are stretched out. So the useful life of a building generally when it gets built, it's about 40 years. That's the amortization rate. And then if you do any type of major improvements, you can always extend that out. So you do, this building's about 40 years old, probably at the end of its useful life, but it's still an excellent building because we've maintained it. And so if we were to finance this, we could probably finance it for another 30 years or something like that. And so because their demands, their investor demands are smaller and stretched over longer periods of terms, they can ask for essentially lower interest rates, as opposed to you have someone build a building and rent it out. They're looking to make back their money at least in the mortgage or the financing term that they borrowed it on, and probably a little bit sooner. They want some profit years. And so that seems to be the difference is that length of that they're able to stretch out and get that money back. Like I said, they're interested in creating yield as opposed to rate of return. So it's just kind of a different focus on how they're recouping their capital investment.
But essentially, it's the same. I mean, we're paying a monthly bill and not owning anything.
Yes.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Obviously, that's probably we would like more additional information, and so, yeah, if staff would like to pursue gathering that.
I don't know if the city administrator has any.
I asked him. Do you have anything you would like to add?
No, Ryan did a good job of explaining it. There's a few big projects that we have in the community that it'd be nice as we look at different models on how to finance and fund it to kind of compare this potential model against traditional financing and lease financing and every other option that might be out there, so the council has options as we go forward with major projects.
Absolutely.
I do think we need to sign this document though.
Yeah, it is a document that would need execution, so it would be a resolution from the city council. But like I said, that doesn't actually commit the city to do any projects. It's just saying, okay, we are willing to enter into a formal relationship for exploration purposes. So there are.
This committee give a stamp or not?
If the committee would be willing to give a recommendation, we can certainly take that to the city
I'll
council.
make the motion.
I'll second that.
Roll call vote, please.
Deacon,
Aye.
Lester,
Aye.
Spicer, Schwartz,
A cautious eye.
Spencer.
Ditto, but yes. Item G, there's no other. Item G, yard waste site cost summary. Mr. Smith.
Yes. I just wanted to give the committee an update. I believe you've maybe seen these cost estimates twice. Once just by email from the city administrator, and then we also added it in the packet. As committee is aware, we, with our own staffing supplemented with a yard waste a landscaping contractor, we ran a site from the beginning of November through the beginning of January. And I want to talk a little bit about hard cost and soft cost, and I'll explain those as I go through. Hard cost would be things that we're paying out to somebody in my definition here. A little over $16,000 was paid to that landscaping company for their labor to run this site on Saturdays all day for some of those weeks. And then we also spent some material cost, about $4,800. And then there was some advertising costs, letting folks know where the site was, which is a little more than $5,000. That totals up in what I'm calling hard cost, $26,500 roughly dollars. We also had some staffing and equipment that was used internally. I'm giving you an estimate of what those costs are. The reality is, the guys that are on regular time, that's just in the budget. We don't track that separately. So I tried to take an average of cost of what we're paying our employees to calculate this. And as you can see in the report, our labor cost using that average hourly rate put toward it, and then factoring in what we would pay them for overtime, is about estimated cost of about $16,000. And then our equipment, if we were to rent equipment to run it, but we actually own our equipment, but if we were to rent the equipment to run it, it would have been another $17,000. So roughly, it's about a $60,000 operation when you combine both soft cost and hard cost. But we're not quite finished with that site yet. Depending on how things go with the RFP, we still have the material there at least to process, and then we have to restore the site. So there are some additional costs that'll be coming. With that, I would happily answer any questions that the committee has.
Any questions? Councilman Schwartz?
What rate did you use on the soft cost for equipment per hour?
$50 an hour for the skid steer and $50 an hour for the roller. Trailer was $15 an hour, and truck was $25 an hour. That's in line with the FEMA cost codes. I didn't get it down to the penny, that's rounded.
Skid steer was 50, the truck was 25.
Trailer was 15, and then the roller was 50. I think I included that in the exhibit. It's down below at the bottom.
Yeah, my iPad's dead.
Yeah, I apologize. When I printed this out, it looked a lot bigger on my screen.
Okay.
Councilman Lester?
First, I'd like to say that the website tracking was great for this project, I thought. It's really good.
We're talking about the dashboard.
The dashboard, yes, excellent. I wanted to ask, there were a little over 2,000 drop-offs, but I know there were quite a few repeats, some people even more than 20 times. So can you say what the usage in terms of unique addresses use the site?
We have that data available. I didn't calculate it, but I could.
I appreciate knowing.
Yeah, well, that data is knowable. I just haven't run that number.
Okay.
Any other questions? Well, again, I think the committee and probably the council, that we really do appreciate the ability that you guys got this operation up and running in such a short period of time. I appreciate the staff that worked it, they were dedicated to it, and they worked hard. And sometimes they got more than what they bargained for with customer interaction at times. But we really appreciated them and valued them, so thank you. All right, item H, Capital Avenue Overlay District. Mr. Smith.
Chairman, so, first of all, just apologies for getting that memo and information out a little late, but we did want to provide you with some information on the overlay district. So, got some staff here. They're going to be kind of give you kind of a little history and a little overview of what's along Capitol Ave and kind of around that surrounding areas a little bit. I think there's probably some interest there, given some infill opportunities. We do hear questions about like what controls development there and what you can and can't do. So hopefully this will kind of provide a little bit of information on kind of what they can expect if they come in and look at that Capitol Avenue area. So Eric Barron's going to give up and kind of give a little history on that and kind of what is in place right now. I just say there's a couple different things going on. We have a zoning in that area that controls kind of the uses you can do, and then we have an overlay which applies a little more to what you can do. So they are kind of two distinct things, even though they're more or less located in the same location. We also put a little information here at the end about an ongoing project we have with a consultant that Ms. Cinzy is working with. It's kind of tangentially related here, although nothing they're doing is going to directly impact what you could build along Capitol Ave in the near term. So really it's kind of the overlay and the zoning. So I'll turn it over to Eric and he'll give you a little bit of background.
Good morning. And so within your, let's see, I think it was printed and handed out to you this morning, a memo. So the memo gives hopefully a bit of an overview, textual. But then also right behind the memo is I think it's a 2-page kind of overview of the the regulations that were being put in place back in 2017. It was a handout that we were using at the time to give an overview to people as to what was being proposed. And then behind that is the actual code text. So I think that's about 7 pages long. So that's an excerpt of the zoning code for the overlay district. As Clinton mentioned, back in 2017, what was put in place for the Capitol Avenue area basically consisted of 2 parts. One was a change in the zoning situation for the area. And within that overview memo, I think there's 2 maps. The bottom map showed the spread of different zoning districts that were in place at the time. So all of that was consolidated under a single new mixed-use zoning district. And then the other half was the overlay district. And so the overlay district.
I'm sorry to interrupt real quick. And that was pre-tornado though, I think.
Yes, yes, certainly, yes. And it was done at basically the same time that the Housing Authority was initiating their urban renewal plan that basically was the start of being able to purchase a lot of the properties in the area and force them to be redeveloped. So. Within the overlay district and the overview, I hope breaks that out in kind of a succinct form. The overlay district basically consists of 2 parts, a set of site design requirements, where a building could be located on a property, basically, and building design requirements, what the exterior facade of the buildings would need to consist of. And of course, the purpose behind the overlay district was to make sure that new buildings that were being constructed in the area would match the existing buildings. So it's a very, based on kind of an Italianate design, architecturally speaking, because that's kind of the prevalent design of that area, but it doesn't specifically call that out. It just lists out the various requirements that are kind of lean toward that type of design. On the zoning side, the purpose was to basically allow for a mix of low impact residential, so smaller scale residential type uses, going up to basically a 4-plex, but having some allowance for larger residential uses. And then also light commercial uses, including small retail. And so these were all based on recommendations of the Central East Side Neighborhood Plan. And so that was a plan that was about 15 years old, but was done at the same time that the prison redevelopment plan was being put in place. And so that plan really envisioned Capitol Avenue to be very office-oriented, but also have some multifamily or even single-family residential uses in it. So it's really an office corridor type of plan. The plan is based on, we did get a lot of public feedback. We held several public meetings back in 2016, 2017. And so a lot of that feedback really leaned into some of the finer points that were included in the regulations. So it is based on an administrative review process as opposed to a public body process. And so there's basically 2 ways to pursue these types of design districts. One is administratively listing the various requirements. The other is sending every project through a design review board, be it a Planning and Zoning Commission, Historic Preservation Commission, or some other body. So the format is fairly similar to what you would see in other communities, so it's fairly representative. We did a lot of research at the time looking at other communities when drafting this. So, and in terms of a route for relief, so if someone was looking at doing a project within this area that just didn't match up with the regulations, really what was envisioned was that they would be directed toward a PUD route. There is some option for variance if it was very minor issues that they were up against, but really the idea was if it was something that was just kind of unique, then it would be put forward as a PUD plan and then would go through a design review body in the form of the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council.
And what you mean by that also is like just a difference in architectural design. If somebody wanted to put a modern style apartment unit up there, is that what you envisioned, and that would be the route that they would have to go, is the PUD route?
That would be the route we would direct them, yeah. So, yeah. Be it a taller apartment building, something that's just bigger. A lot of the design, again, was based on a residential Italianate type of design. So 2-story tall residential buildings, historic buildings. And so if someone was proposing something larger, then yeah. Was really hopeful that the terms 2 flat and 4 flat, so residential uses, and there's the one residential building left in the 400 block that was really designed like that, 2 up and 2 down, all of them facing the street. Was really hoping that there would be things like that, because those are fairly easy to build, and I would think in terms of matching up with the regulations. There's one existing example of them. So.
I know transformational housing, Jackson Street, to make it for 5 units, they had to go through PUD.
That's correct. That there's basically been 3 PUD plans within the area. One of them actually occurred before the district was put in place, but the district was in process, and that was the Avenue HQ, which of course was completely destroyed by a tornado. The transformational housing project, again, because it was exceeding the 4 units. Okay. And then Ivy Terrace, they're proposed an event center. And so that was a higher level of commercial use. Again, we kind of envisioned there would be something like that, and that would have to be accommodated through a PUD plan. But the original plan for the area, essentially site neighborhood plan, didn't envision those heavy commercial uses that would have a lot of vehicle traffic associated with them. So.
Well, I think the reason why I wanted us to get to this point is that, we had a very monumental change in our community, tornado that happened in 2019. And so that created a lot of vacant properties, and with what we're doing with some other properties that the city's acquiring, that they're just no longer, it's no longer an option to rehab those properties. So my viewpoint is I just would like our code not to be restrictive and discouraging from a perspective of, these kinds of architectural styles are definitely more expensive to build and reproduce. So I'd like us to be more encouraging of development, and I think, especially with what has transpired, has had that effect of kind of stifling and hindering development up there. So, but we really appreciate the information. I don't mean to cut you off. So if there's any other information you want to share, and again, it was just to get something really concise and in front of our eyes, and this helped with that. I appreciate you doing that, Clint. But I think we want to kind of get more involved in this and encourage development in that area. Anybody have any questions?
I have one question. Has there been much interest in rehabbing or building new there, but they said, whoa, I just can't quite do it because of restrictions? I know our economic climate right now is not conducive for building up there. People turn away just because of the overlay.
So I'm not necessarily the only person that might receive some of those requests. I will say that, and it's not unique to Capitol Avenue, but building costs everywhere are a major concern.
No, I'm at the overlay district itself because of restrictions on the architectural design and our setbacks and et cetera. Has there been?
Most feedback that I've received is really, my interpretation is it's focused on general building costs more so than specific requirements. If there were specific requirements within there, there's a couple different routes for relief, and I would direct those people to those routes. We just never get to that point.
And so the best predictor of the future is the past. And so the opportunities for actual redevelopment in Capitol Avenue have been limited. And so we have had both rehabilitation projects. The city sold a couple of buildings on Capitol Avenue last year. Those are proceeding consistently with what the overlay would allow. They're not looking for any relief. Transformational housing, when it's a minor relief, there was an avenue available for that. Ivy Terrace had a little bit more relief, and that was really more based on their desired use as opposed to building form. And so those are some examples of rehabilitations. I don't think that the overlay has proved to be any type of hindrance to that. For new builds, there hasn't been any real opportunity. It's just, they've been held by a single property owner who hasn't been able to, that was unwilling to sell any of the property. And so, you know, it just, there really hasn't been real opportunity. So the answer to that question is, I think it's untested, because, you know, with maybe an exception of a building that got destroyed by the tornado, there really hasn't been any real opportunity for new build redevelopment. And so it's hard to answer that question, because any inquiry into what the overlay does or does not do has been nothing but theoretical. There hasn't been the opportunity to really put pen to paper, hire an engineer and an architect and figure out how much does anything would actually cost. And so I think the answer is it's incomplete. We don't know what the overlay is doing or not to new construction opportunities.
I would tend to add the element of just common sense, and what I've had conversations with developers and contractors is, anytime you do have a little bit more of a restrictive area, it does kind of limit folks that would like to make something happen there. So I think that's the spirit that I'm coming from within this, of maybe wanting to revisit this and look at opportunity and options for people like that. So.
And if I could just jump in, relatedly, I can give an update on our acquisition project, and that's how this relates to this. So the condemnation commissioners in the case against Mrs. Busher have entered a fair market value for all the properties, and the city is currently in the process of processing that amount and getting it paid into the circuit court. So once the city pays that money into the circuit court, then we become owners. So within the next 30 days, the city will be the owner of all those properties, unless something goes horribly awry. But I'm not anticipating that. So with that, and then going back to the original plan on how to encourage redevelopment and dispose of those properties back to the private market, we're working currently on the RFPs, and so essentially an offering to the public for redevelopment or new build redevelopment, rehabilitation or redevelopment of the properties. And so as it relates to the overlay, what our plan is to basically say, okay, here's the existing zoning, but propose anything and let us know what changes or relief that you would need, and then we will take that into consideration when we are evaluating your project against other people who may have bid on a property. And so while recognizing that there is existing, I think we are saying, but that's not the only thing that we are looking for. We want to see your ideas, even if they don't conform with the existing zoning, because we have a process of relief, and we will take into consideration your plans when we decide whether or not to sell you the property. And so that's kind of our proposed approach, is to make sure that there is an invitation and a clear opportunity advertised to move away from any restriction that they may see as being a hindrance to redevelopment. And so, of course, that's 20 plus properties over there. That is the vast majority of the property that we are talking about. And so we think that it could be a elegant solution to, I think, some of the issues that maybe you're hearing is, you know, the city's just not interested in this one thing and you have to fit in this box. We want to see everyone's best ideas, and then we'll make the appropriate evaluation.
I like that approach, thank you. And I appreciate the update on those properties.
Sure.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move to other and old business. Item A is Rolling Hills traffic calming. Mr. Bangy.
Yes, just a short memo in the packet. So we've talked about this over the last couple of meetings. And at the last meeting, we kind of had talked about what the Traffic and Transportation Commission had proposed, in addition to a couple of other options, one of them being a chicane and the other some mini roundabouts. It didn't seem as if any of those options had gained any traction. And so we went back and looked at perhaps another option that could potentially have some effect on speed through this corridor. And it's basically a striping plan. We've used similar striping plans on other streets in town, Tanner Bridge Road, also on West Edgewood Drive, and South Country Club. And so what this would do is basically paint a parking areas on the south side, or south of the lower side of the picture as you see it, and then also stripe the other side so that we would create two 10.5-foot wide through lanes. The street, we've done some further observations, and ultimately the parking along the street is somewhat more limited than what we originally had thought, or at least originally what I had thought. And so perhaps the street does actually appear wider to folks driving through there than it would if there were parking consistently. So basically the plan is to stripe it so to make it appear narrower and then affect speed, or perhaps slow the speeds of traffic. The way that we have this shown ultimately is that there would be parking on what is the lower side of the drawing, lower side of the road, and then we could also stripe what could be a pedestrian preferred corridor along what is the upper side of the road. And so do that basically by creating a small, basically a double stripe that's 1.5 feet wide to kind of create a little bit of a buffer area, and then sort of preferred area for walking on the side of the road. And so that's just another option that is potentially possible. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about that.
Did you have some discussions with this option with some of the neighbors?
We have sent, we've sent these drawings to the folks that we had email contacts for. We have not received anything back to my knowledge.
Are you wanting us to?
He's on the line. One gentleman there if he wants to speak.
I was gonna say, what's the cost effectiveness?
We don't necessarily, we just wanted to present this as another potential possible option since the others didn't necessarily seem to get a lot of traction. We're, again,
Okay.
citizens seemed to indicate that they were interested in something, so we wanted to be able to provide all the options that we could imagine would be beneficial.
Councilman Schwartz.
Do we have any data or feedback from Tanner Bridge folks on the effectiveness of it?
We have taken speed counts on those streets that we've done this to, and we've seen a reduction in speed, perhaps as much as 2 miles an hour. So it's somewhat minor, but it is a reduction. And really haven't received any really negative feedback from those applications. There was some concern, I think, on Tanner Bridge originally. As we striped it, was requiring people to set their trash cans up behind the curb instead of in front of the curb. But apart from that, there really hasn't been any conversation that I'm aware of people, not liking that solution.
So on Tanner Bridge, there's only one stripe, correct?
Correct. The road is narrower, and so we only have it partly striped on the one side.
I think what I'm seeing is this would be a double proposing.
Correct. There would be, right. So we are proposing parking on the lower side of this picture, and then we're not necessarily restricting the parking on the opposite side. The lane would be the same width at 7 feet from the curb. But we could also potentially stripe that as a pedestrian preferred route and add a second stripe to create that buffer space.
Which is what was done on Country Club.
Have you ever used like I don't know what they're called, but plastic type reflector things along those striped lines?
That's embedded in the asphalt or concrete?
Yeah.
We haven't used anything that is embedded. I know that there's any number of products that are sort of, bolt on top, whether they be the flexible delineators, or there's these things called, zebra bumpers that are basically little bitty plastic curb things that get installed every so many feet. I mean, there are devices out there. Probably those would be some hindrance to the clearing of the street if there was, snow or otherwise, but those types of things do exist.
I would just add that we've taken things we've done on multiple streets and combined them all into this one. Like you said, Tanner Bridge had striping on one side. Edgewood, just above JCMG, had a lot of complaints about walkers and traffic speed. So we striped both sides because that road was wide enough, and I go through there a lot taking my kid to school, and I see people out walking in the morning. They felt more comfortable. We haven't received negative feedback, so that in our world, that's pretty good. And then Country Club was another one, often requested. Sidewalk really was the request there. And on an overlay project, we came up with this solution there. The main thing was, well, what if I have to park there at night, or I have a party and there's overflow parking? So we didn't restrict parking necessarily by signage or code. It just kind of looks like you shouldn't park there maybe, but people do. And it seems to have satisfied those requests as well. So we took all those three projects, kind of combined them here. It's low cost, the asphalt street, correct?
Correct.
We could remove the markings later if need be. They'll wear off eventually, but it is a low cost solution to try to address some concerns. So.
And if I could add on, ask for feedback on Tanner Bridge. When we first marked it, the only feedback that I heard was the lanes were too narrow, which was by design, because the narrow lanes hopefully encourages you to slow down. So I would, when you ask that question, I want to make sure I add that feedback.
Councilman Lister.
Yeah, I would just say on the neighborhoods that have these problems, like this one here, it seems like the issue really is with a few, maybe 2 to 5% speeders. And so whatever we do, I would encourage us to look at afterwards and see if it affects those, that segment, because that's really what's being the danger and perception of a much bigger danger.
Yeah, and included with your packet, there was some information from the data that we had collected back in June, and I have just a slide up with the kind of some graphic representations of what that was. So the green that you see in those pie charts are basically the traffic that's going the speed limit or less. The yellow being the traffic that's going from 30 to 30, I think that's 30 to 40. And then we have 40 to 50, and so you can kind of see the breakout of those. And so those are taken. The one in the upper left-hand corner is down near St. Mary's, and the one down in the lower right is up near the daycare center, and the other two are sort of split in the middle. So it appears as if yes. So the yellow is 30 to 35, the orange is 35 to 40. So, and then the purple is above 50. So you can kind of see that it does appear that the speeds increase through the center section of that road, both in the number of people speeding and the speed of the vehicles in themselves. So, but just that information is included in your packet. You can
I would say we probably don't often find the charts this skewed like this. When somebody requests a neighborhood, says, hey, people are speeding, we go set our counters out. Usually it is a fairly low number. This is ironically not that. So there's a good chunk of that pie chart that is above the speed limit, which we don't normally find, quite frankly. And so sometimes it's just a lot of perception. This is probably, skewing towards, there is some speeding going on through this corridor. And then I've just add on, we did order an electronic sign in place out there temporarily. Had a lot of problems with it. It was picking up snowflakes and missing white cars and all kinds of stuff. And so we called the rep, and they've taken that back and are repairing it and looking at what the issue is. So, the data out of that was all over the place. So this is our normal traffic count data that we do with hoses. One thing on these stripes, we did send an email to the residents very recently, but we want to work with them some more to make sure this was something they would like to see before we do that. But we just wanted to preview it with you guys as well beforehand.
I think it's a good option. Obviously, I'm on record as saying that I really like to see sidewalks in the area, get those folks off the street. So, Mr. Casey, you have?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I would like to see the sign when it comes back on the other direction, because I think more people come up over the hill speeding than the opposite direction, because there's more turns there on the other end, the more turnoffs to streets, and then it's a little bit narrower because of some of the parking. So I would like to see it coming from the other direction to see what your data is. I think this would be a good, hopefully low cost attempt to reduce speed, and I would be all for it. So
That was my next.
That's all I had. So
glad you shared that. Thank you, Mr. Casey. Does that give you enough?
Yeah, I think we're just looking for feedback really at this point. We still want to talk. I think another resident just popped up on the screen maybe, but just, we want to provide some alternatives. We think this has been accepted by other neighborhoods, so this kind of combo of those, but just kind of throw it out there and see what happens.
Mr. Davis, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You have some comments.
So, sorry?
You have some comments. You're welcome to share.
Thank you, sir. So, my question is in regard to that speed sign that was in discussion at the last meeting that has been removed for technical difficulty. So there's no reliable data that came from that sign over the course of the 3 or 4 weeks that it was up? Is that what the city staff is saying?
Yeah, essentially we have, we went out and observed the sign, and certainly we've talked about the snow, that it was picking up the snow. We also know that it was having a lot of difficulty picking up cars that were either white or silver. And so again, if you know that those things exist, then it's hard to really extrapolate anything from the data because you don't know what else it wasn't doing. And so.
Okay, so a conversation that I had with your staff, sir, was that there appears to be a camera attached to the radar ability of that sign, that it would attach an image or a color of a vehicle and attach that to the speed. So you can detect whether it was a car or a truck or, like a city bus or something that would detect, hey, this is a larger object going at a certain speed versus a smaller object. Did that sign have that capability to detect and produce an image with the speeder itself?
Not to my knowledge.
So then why are we talking about being able to not see a particular color vehicle in the background in relation to the speed? Why is that part of the discussion if the camera doesn't have that capability?
The sign simply did not register that vehicle. So the car drove by, the sign never noticed it. And so there's no data associated with that car.
Okay, so the words that you're using about a color of the car has no relation to the bearing of the actual radar unit, because radar is just a signal. It's a bouncing effect. The camera picking up a color is a completely different function, and that's what was lost in the conversation with your staff, that it appeared that this sign was doing two different things, and now it's only doing one thing. Is that correct?
I am not a technician, so I'm not entirely for sure the inner workings of the technology of the sign. We simply know that our observations were that the sign was seemingly not noticing white or silver colored cars for whatever reason.
But it was able to pick up white snow.
That is correct.
I think the confusion is the sensitivity of, we were trying to get it to not see snow. And as a result, we started not seeing cars. So we talked with the manufacturer, they said something seems to be wrong. We took the thing down and we sent it back in.
And that goes to your discussion, Mr. Smith, about this particular sign not having the functionality that you would really like to see in a sign of this nature. But the functionality point, I think, would be quite a bit more expensive than what your budget allows or what you have been allowed to spend on a sign like this. Is that correct?
No, I don't think that's a characterization. What I said, we tried to get sign X from company Y that we worked with. It was a long lead time. This is a company we had not worked with, but they are more than a reputable company. We looked at the references. We don't have any reason to believe that the sign is in itself flawed. We just apparently may have a bad sensor or something. And we're trying to, working with the company, and they're being very responsive to us.
Well, I understand that, but at the last meeting, you said that you wanted a product that had more functionality than what this particular product was able to provide for you, and it was available on a shorter time frame than the other product that you truly wanted. That was maybe at a higher price point. So my question is, it seems like we've invested several weeks of time and effort and a little bit of money to get some data, and we're still back to using data from the month of June that really is not indicative of what we're seeing now. And we're trying to make decisions based on a path forward with data that is 8 months old. And we can't see a path forward that's legitimate, because the data that the city staff is able to maintain or gather is not reliable. That's the message that I'm hearing. I'm not opposed to putting in a pedestrian bike lane or pedestrian walk lane on one side of the street or the other. I agree with Mr. Casey that, putting up a sign on the other, or putting up some sort of data collecting device on the other side of the street, other end of the street, is definitely warranted. My fear is that if we go through with a striping plan and you don't restrict parking on either the east or the west side of the street, then you still have residents that still park on both sides, on the side closest to your house. So if you don't restrict parking on one side or the other, what is the true use of having this bike lane or this pedestrian walk lane? What's the use of it if you're not going to restrict the parking on either side? I'd like you to address that, please.
Yeah, I think, this is Matt Marash. I think this is just a concept drawing right now. We haven't vetted it with the neighborhood, you folks, and so that's the next step, is to come back and talk to you about that. If there is a neighborhood support for fully restricting parking in that area, the city could do that, but we want to know what the neighborhood thinks. So the next step is to go back and engage the neighborhood and talk about this plan and work these issues out with the folks that live out there. So we just wanted to preview this with our committee and let them know what we're up to with the neighborhood. So
I think it would be beneficial if the city staff were to present an idea with the neighborhood at a facility, a church nearby, or something outside of either of the two committees that we've been in discussion with, that we could actually sit down with the city staff and say, hey, these are the options. That's going to take this long. This is, what is it that that the residents on the street truly want, instead of having to come through a meeting or sit through a video, meeting like we are now. It seems like we're too high on the food chain to make decisions that directly affect the residents. If we're not getting a response by email, maybe showing a sign of good faith that we can meet unofficially or slightly official at a time or a place that kind of meets everyone else's ability. Is that something that's an option?
Yeah, certainly that's what we're talking about. We'll be coordinating that soon with you all.
So why hasn't that been
I
brought
think
up
that's a good
before? It seems
idea.
like this is going on 4 or 5 months.
Well, that would be the next step.
Well, I think
agree. I
there
think
would be
it would be
more
a
than
good
one
idea.
person on the street that would be willing to meet the city staff and discuss this.
Excellent.
We will try to coordinate that. Mr. Davis, I assume staff does have you and Mr. Casey's contact information.
Mr. Bangy's staff has been in regular conversation and contact with me on an ongoing basis.
All right, and you could relay.
And we appreciate that.
You could relay a meeting that you're suggesting to the rest of your neighborhood, Mr. Davis, or?
Yeah.
I think Mr. Casey and I would be more than happy to relay this information to our fellow neighbors, yes.
Great, thank you. All right. We'll get staff and you guys hooked up to try to link up to get something going, okay?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Item B, speed hump policy. Councilman Spencer. This was sent.
Tee it up if you.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
So, through this process, obviously, I've been talking a lot about speed humps, and I think I made a comment probably at the last meeting that, hey, when we work with groups like the residents there through TNT, and this has occurred for many years now, that, we don't really have a set policy on what kind of devices for speed reduction, the city might allow. And so we've bid speed humps before and then not implemented them, so maybe we got some neighbors' hopes up or something like that. There's been various petitions asking for them in various neighborhoods, so kind of having the council's direction, hey, speed humps aren't an option, might be good to have up front, so that when we do work with neighborhoods, we just, that is already off the table. And
just streamline the process.
Yeah, now, I would say, there might be cases where the city council wants to put them in, or, various crossings or things. This does talk about some raised intersections and things like maybe in downtown, maybe that might be a good idea. So I wouldn't want to be super restrictive about it, but if we had kind of a nod to, neighborhood speed humps are generally not going to be installed, that would be good information to relay to the public as we go through these processes. I would say the one we have done that has seemed to work out well for us and for parks is the one over on Kansas Street, where the Greenway crosses. And there's a lot of people going to the ice arena, and predominantly for whatever reason, they choose to park there instead of behind the facility. And so there was a lot of, we had people parking in the little circle drive, which they tried to restrict. So they finally took that out. So kind of working with them and trying to get people across there is what the goal of that was. And from the feed, I haven't heard any feedback that it hasn't worked well for them. The other one people talk about is over by the school. That's really not a speed hump, although we signed it as such. That was about getting a compliant ADA crossing over their new sports facilities. If the vertical curve were drug out far enough, you wouldn't notice the bump, but because working through the school and their cost issues, I'll put it that way, it kind of ended up being almost half a speed hump really. And so we went ahead and signed it so people would know there's a bump in the road there. So that isn't ideal, obviously. If you look on the other side of the school, we actually did some work internally on the intersection there on Adams Street where we drug those vertical curves out and made that a lot smoother, even though we flattened that out so people could cross there at the intersection. So those are kind of just some background information. For example, we have a grant project coming up to put in a couple better enhanced ADA crossings on Lafayette Street and over on Southwest. Those aren't speed humps either. Those are really 30 mile an hour vertical curves on those. So in other words, you drive 30 miles an hour and you should be fine, not feel that like anything else. There will have to be flattened out for the accessibility part of it, but we'll drag the curves out far enough that you feel those.
Is that, when you said Lafayette, is that the one that's by the walking trail on ROT?
Yeah, they're both on the Greenway, and so we were lucky enough to get some grants for those, but that's why the cost of those is so expensive, because there's quite a bit of work going on there just to mean that flat spot out, if you will.
Well, again, I think I've talked to a few on this committee, and we just think that it slows the process down if there's not clear stipulations of what would be accessible or acceptable. I think we have some of our public safety personnel, especially within the county of Cole County EMS, that might want to share some thoughts on this as well.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
So this popped up on our radar regarding the conversations on Rolling Hills Drive. Obviously, with the access to the hospital and the emergency department, that was something that was very keen in our interest. I certainly do sympathize with the residents over there. However, there's really three areas of concern when it comes to elevated crossings or some sort of elevated traffic control device. Obviously, you know, minor issues are response times. It's going to increase delay or add delay to emergency response. And then wear and tear on apparatus. Anytime you have an apparatus that has a high center of gravity when they're transversing those elevated traffic control devices, it does create stress on the suspensions and other components. However, the main concern is really for personnel safety. We do a lot and have put a lot of resources in place to make sure our folks are secure as much as possible. However, given the type of work that we do and the seriousness that can often be associated with transporting somebody to the hospital, sometimes being secure in the back of an ambulance is not always an option. And from personal experience, even at low speed, transversing a elevated speed device while not being secured does present plenty of opportunities for harm to our staff. So that's our main concern is personnel safety. You know, I know that the explanation of the crossing at the high school, it was not intended to be that. However, we have had a minor incident there responding to an incident last year where maybe there was some equipment that got elevated in the back of the ambulance because they weren't aware that there was a hump there. So it is a real concern. And like I said, I am sympathetic to the folks who live on that street. Just some basic feedback. I had a meeting at St. Mary's during the time when the sign was up. I did notice it, and it did, you know, make a difference to my speed as I was transversing that area. So I would encourage to continue down that path because I do think that it would ultimately help. So that's just feedback from our perspective. I don't know if Chief Schofield had anything to add, but happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Well, we do appreciate your feedback, and sometimes, you know, we do forget about the personnel working in the back of a truck, maybe doing CPR efforts or something like that, and they don't have the opportunity to be secured. So appreciate you.
Thank you for the opportunity to share some feedback.
I have a question for Mr. Morash. What does that do with snow removal? The streets that do have the bumps in them?
Well, we know they're there, obviously, but we try to accommodate that through the design that there is a ramp there that the driver can go up and over. Same with truck aprons, et cetera, and roundabouts, same thing. You notice the roundabouts in Jefferson City have a kind of a beveled lip on them. That's the reason for that. That is, hadn't been the standard. We just made it up ourselves because of snow removal. And we always try to think about those things as we're doing this. The other thing on speed humps, you know, you'd have to be careful that you don't trap the water on one side or another. So that's another major consideration when we look at these. So we try to get the grades right and things like that. Now, again, it hasn't been, other than the high school one is probably the most talked about. That could be cured by basically rebuilding a section of road to get it up there. What happened was it was an afterthought by the designer of where all the people park versus where they're going to watch, you know, the kids play ball, whether it's grandma or grandpa or whoever needs, you know, a good accessibility to get across that street is kind of a steep street. So when they leveled that out, they did a very short taper. We discussed it much and relented. It was kind of their last thing they wanted to do. And anyway, we probably could have done a better job of that, so.
Well, so policies before you, we would like to try to get this out of committee to give the full council. Is there any, was there any changes you, that's why I
Yeah, I'd
presented
like
to you
to
all first.
think about the intersection type thing, you know, especially where you would see that is really like on a high street or something where you're trying to keep the speeds really low.
More in a commercial district.
Yeah, and or in downtown areas where I mainly see that, and this community is mostly high street, but it could be other places, I suppose. But it probably wouldn't be neighborhood speed humps, I think was the goal, is what I was thinking we were trying to accomplish. You know, you should be driving pretty slow if you're going down High Street. We've all talked about the scooters and everything else down there, you know, whizzing around, but there's a lot of pedestrians, especially. That's the issue. But for example, we wouldn't place them on. We have another crossing coming up on Edgewood, enhanced crossing, but you know, there's no opportunity for a speed hump there. Obviously, you know, that'd be pretty detrimental to the traffic, and so. But we have to be careful about what we're doing there and dragging the slope out and everything like that when we do flatten those streets out. So we put a lot of thought into that internally when it's a city project. But maybe we can look at this a little bit and maybe come back with something a little more tailored to neighborhood speed humps. Is that fair?
That's fine. I just wanted to get something out there to get it going.
Thank you, appreciate that. I think it'll help the staff when we work with our T&T Commission, Traffic and Transportation Commission with neighborhood issues. So maybe another month from now, we'll bring something back a little more definitive, and we work with Ryan how we can either codify that or put it in a standard or whatever it needs to be.
I just reluctant to totally take tool out of the toolbox that we have. And I know, you know, there's plenty of evidence that speed humps, they work, they do the job. And I would prefer something where it's more less preferred option that other things are reviewed for it. I know in the past, there's been a number of attempts for speed humps, and we've talked about temporary to try them out, and then it's never happened. At some point, I think that's probably gonna happen, where we're gonna have a neighborhood street where we have the real problem and the other solutions haven't worked, and so you probably want to try it out.
I sympathize with you, Councilman Lester. I just think that in residential streets, I just don't think that's, there's just too many other downsides to it as well that have cost implications that are hard to track and those kinds of things too. So I'm fine with Councilman Dean.
I have the luxury of not a luxury of, we have a lot of children. I have scattered on both coasts, up and down, all over. And we put on 4,000 to 5,000 miles in our car every year visiting kids and stuff. And I've been thinking back, I don't see speed humps on any of the residential streets, major streets. I see them in parks. I see them in, just parkways. I'm thinking from San Francisco to Portland to all through Tucson and all through the Southwest, Oregon. I just have, we just did an extensive trip through a bunch of California. I don't want to drive there again. They drive in the left lane as a habit. They don't even stay in the right lane. That's crazy. But yeah, it just really, this last year, just the trucks in the right lane, that was wild. And they're under the speed limit in the left lane. But I have not seen, I'm trying to think back. The only place I had speed humps when I was trying to cut through here in San Francisco last year. I don't see them around. I really don't. So I don't think that it's a tool that's used very well in other cities or used very often in the other cities. That's my statement.
So if we can streamline it to, you know, removing that tool on residential neighborhoods and areas, I think that would help T&T. I think that would help us and definitely
Right, and the ones I've seen, and I worked in an area that did have this policy, and so there is a more of affirmative policy. This is the policy, here's the funding source, and you have to have this many people petition for it, and et cetera. It was very affirmative, and it did happen, this out around Indianapolis, but you know, that's generally, if you're gonna have a speed hump policy, it's affirmative, we're having them. We kind of don't have it either way, so it'd be nice to clear that up. I think in absence of it, we really don't have a speed hump avenue, but we're reluctant to tell people that, I guess, at this point. But if we can clean this up a little bit, I think we can actually start there and say, you know, unless some special circumstance, the council could always implement it. But that's kind of where we're at now anyway. But we don't tell people that up front because we don't have an affirmative policy. So
We'll look forward to, we'll have a little bit.
come back with something.
Cleaner draft. Just forgive me, there was a couple items real quick I wanted to hit. Councilman Wright and I have had some discussions about a dusk to dawn light on Edgewood and Creek Trail. I think I sent an email to you several weeks back, and that I think you were gonna look into that it really didn't have to be.
Yeah, I believe that's on order to be installed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted an update on it, thank you. And then I've been getting some calls in my ward about Stormwater Creek maintenance. Is there something that we can send out, publicize through, even with our news media partners on Facebook about, especially as we're gonna be entering the springtime, you know, some of that stuff's gonna reoccur with trash and increased limbs and stuff like that. What is permissible by the property owner that has that as a stormwater route on their property, to what they can do to help maintain that?
Yeah, I mean, the code, and this is pretty much more or less a national standard, is that most, you know, if it's private property, unless the city has particularly entered into an easement over that creek, it's the property owner's responsibility. That's in our code as well, to maintain. They can maintain it really as they see fit. We can advise them, maybe, you know, certainly don't take all the trees out, that probably increase erosion, but they want to clean it up. It's their property to do so. And so we do prohibit, you know, our code does prohibit dumping like yard waste into them and things like that, which will end up creating more erosion, more problems for the property owner in the end. So yeah, we have some, I think, citizen information brochures down there about this very subject, actually.
I think that's something we could post on Facebook and just, you know, highlight that in the coming weeks. If there's nothing else on the speed hump, we'll go to reports. Neighborhood?
Sure. On Stadium Satinwood, what is our plan going forward as far as the traffic control at that intersection? You mentioned the light there's a problem with the light.
Well, it's not compliant currently, but it is functioning. And so until we have to update it, it'll just remain as is. I mean, you know, it kind of ties back to we talked about a lot of, it ties back to our first topic of today about the city county sales tax. That's generally where these bigger intersection roadway projects fall, and it has been for many, many years that way. That's our funding source for those kind of things. So we talked about doing a project there. We talked about doing some more things on Madison. I think Madison could sneak into our overlay if that would be an acceptable solution there this next year. But we're still working on that overlay list. But really, we're not up in the mode of updating it currently past what we've already talked about. And if you look at the list, if we're moving back to the High Street grant application, it's kind of starting to tie money up, and that's great. You know, that's a needed project. But what we had originally talked about was, okay, we're not going to do High Street Viaduct. We're just going to use that source of funding elsewhere. And so now we've kind of explored that, I feel like, is what happened. We explored that. It ended up we're not going to go that route. We're going to go back to this grant application process and try to get that project done. And so there's really not money available for other projects unless we look at not doing something on the list that we just showed you this morning.
So when that light gets so it has to be replaced or it's not functional.
Yeah, we're working through our own, you know, maintenance budget on that. You know, we've had other lights that that somebody ran over them and weren't compliant, we talked to the council and just took them down. That one would take more effort, obviously, because of what's there, but, we'll have to cross that when we come to it.
So would that get replaced with a smart light or what?
I don't know, we'll just have to, do that at the time. The traffic counts don't warrant a light there, so if council would have to probably fund something to put it back, and we have to be compliant when we put it back. If that's what they wanted to do, we'd give you the council options at the time. I'm just talking hypothetically here, but there is no changes slated for it in the immediate future at all.
Councilman Schwartz.
And this is a long-term deal, but I would like to get kind of a cost estimate on what it would take to clean up Weir's Creek from like the hospital, old hospital to like Lafayette. I don't know if that's Weir's Creek, I'm guessing.
Yeah, East Branch, Wares Creek, yeah, that's what it's called.
If I remember right, that used to be all cleaned up and mowed and weed eated and stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I thought back in the day, I'm talking 30 years ago, that we kept that, cleaned up. I know it would be very expensive. I think it's a nice part of entering downtown, and it's just kind of has a bunch of overgrowth and stuff like that in it. So just brainstorm it. I don't need a.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. There is a major box culvert under Miller Street there, I think is the name of the street, Miller Street, Frontage Road, right?
Well, I'm not for sure we're talking about the same area.
Well, if he's going from the old hospital all the way back, yeah.
Well,
East
it's all
Branch.
concrete. So the
Well, no.
concrete section?
By Coca-Cola.
By Coke.
Oh.
So anyway, yeah, we can give you an update on what that looks like. There is a pending lawsuit there. So there's been some changes in development along there as well, but we can look at that back to the concrete section, I guess.
I just seem to remember that used to be cleaned up, and I just think it would look good as you kind of get into the heart of Jeff City and it would clean up Monroe Street and all that there. I mean, I would just like to see what, they call it a wag. Wild, what guess.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Yeah, we've actually applied for some grants through there over time, especially on this box culvert issue. So it's kind of ugly, but it'd be good to talk about, I think.
okay, thank you very much.
Piggyback on to Councilman Schwartz, this has been a complaint for years. It's not been brought up. It's been brought up to council after council, and just no one really cared. And it's just kind of like that big piece of sod that never did grow right in the front yard. You just finally just didn't care. The bad spot in the yard, it's an ugly, ugly entrance and exit to our city, and no one has cared. That's just the way I'm gonna say.
Well, and I'm sure there's some budgetary constraints maybe in the past that contributed to that. But I think it's worth looking at least getting it to the point where it's not, a jungle.
Yeah, I know in the past, and not 30 years ago, I haven't lived here that long, 20 though. I know the Gordons own a piece of property there, and they maintained it maybe more today than what the current property owner does. And it is, again, some mowed out right away through there. It's all over the place. There's some old in-lot, out-lot right away through there as well, which, is city right away. So it's just all over the place. There's all kinds of utilities there. Coca-Cola, they used to maintain it differently. Of course, they have an issue now with the parking lot sliding off, so that's always a factor. And I know the Central Dairy, they actually moved their building towards the creek and built a concrete wall there and just said, okay, that's what it's gonna be. It's not gonna erode. And so that, it just depends on which property we're talking about, but we can kind of give you an overview of it and go from there. It is costly to do and maintain.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I add something to that conversation?
Absolutely.
You want to pay for it?
Oh, I like that.
Let's talk. No, but so my understanding is back several years ago, MoDOT used to mow that whole right of way through there because that's mostly all MoDOT right of way. They used to take care of that a lot more than they do now due to funding issues and whatnot. And so I think that's part of why it looks so bad. but then the stream itself just has not been taken care of. Brush growing and all that, and that just adds to the problem. It's an eyesore. It's a terrible eyesore for the whole community going through there. It's a city issue. I mean, if you want to think of it in terms of bigger, it's a county issue, it's a MoDOT issue. It would be a good place for a park. I mean, honestly, it would be. You could connect a trail through there. There's a park in Columbia, Flat Branch Park, I think, in which they took an ugly old stream like that and made it something that people would go to. So cleaning the whole thing up. As to how you do it, it's going to take a lot of money and it's going to take a lot of coordination with different public entities to make it happen. So having a conversation, at least getting some ideas out there as to what could happen. I think everybody needs to be part of that conversation.
And the east side plan does show that very thing. Yeah.
For the south side.
South side, sorry, yeah.
And I'm pretty sure the old Munisburg Association owns a little chunk of property right at the end, right where that old bridge is there. And at one time they talked about maybe a little pocket park type thing right there, so it's just a matter of pulling some things together and making something happen.
And putting it on the priority list, yeah, of course, you know.
I just like trying to help out my friends in New York too.
Maybe bring
My
it
friend.
Just to hit back on something you said, you guys are working on the blacktop overlay list. If there's ways that we as councilmen could kind of share some information of areas, I know we don't like to kind of get into that too much, but just.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten several calls already about it, and that's why I said I just want to. I did throw it out there. Yeah, we think maybe next month we'll have a good list put together, and what we do after the winter, and it's been kind of a tough winter with all the ice. First of all, we hit the potholes fairly hard, and hopefully we're doing a good job of that right now. But we'll get our list together because things do change when you have weather like that, and then we kind of make it match the money. So Britt and I had a meeting yesterday, in fact, about, where's our money at exactly and that kind of thing. Also in relationship to the concrete street contract that we talked about earlier. That's coming to an end. We've spent that money. So we're hoping to maybe locate some more money for that. That was, I think, a really good program. Some of the streets that people have sent me are actually concrete streets, so I typically don't try not to put asphalt on top of them, but we'll try to have a good list based on where we get the best bang for our buck, and we'll take into consideration, not to say we'll put all the streets in there as a staff. Now, the council can either fund more money or take some out and move it around. That I know it's putting you in a precarious position to do that, but we're just going to give you our best judgment on it and go from there. That's what we do.
As elected officials, I think we have good insight of what, especially when we get calls from constituents of, hey, and we go out there and we
So certainly if there's streets that any councilman wants us to make sure we put in the mix, we'll certainly put that in the evaluation.
And we'll try to also, like I said, we do that 3-year list for maybe anybody that's newer. And in some of them, there's a rating assigned. We have also an electronic rating, I'll put it that way, that a consultant did for us. So we kind of evaluate those things. And sometimes though, we add a street that's next to another one because we're there. So we don't have to pick the machine up, move it around so much, but anyway.
Just real quick, Crystal View Terrace, off Boonville there, city, yeah.
Yeah, there was a water service leak caused a blow up there on Crystal View Terrace. We work with the water company. They've got the water service fixed. We're fixing the road.
That's a great other segue. So the other thing we talked about yesterday that I just forgot to mention is the water company is very active over in that general area of replacing old service lines from lead or other things that are issues. And so it's kind of a bit of a guesstimate to keep up with them almost. They kind of have a plan, but they modify it regularly. And so if we, it's really hard to go overlay a street and then see the water company come back and make Swiss cheese out of it.
Yeah,
so we're trying to mitigate that the best we can. So sometimes that might delay. And just in general, we do look at that issue with utilities. If we know a gas line's coming through, hey, we may have to delay that, but we try to tell you that up front is the reasoning. So.
And if I could just tack on to that, just from notifying citizens, I personally had a galvanized service was off earlier this week. and the water company at no charge to me replaced my service into my house with a new poly service line. That's that's something they're working through with all citizens throughout the city. And so if you let people know that, because I don't think the word's getting out to a lot of people to get evaluated. If they find a lead service, that's the first priority they get. Galvanized services they work through. I can tell you, working with their contractor was a breeze. I was expecting my yard to be a war zone by the time they finished, but they left it in very good shape. I'm very pleased with what happened.
I'll have to agree with that. They put in over 100 yards of mine from the meter to the house. It was over 100 yards. And that was great. I mean, no mess, nothing. I mean, I've got water pressure now.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good service. And they came to the council and kind of gave us a brief update on that. But if we can help them promote that in any way.
My neighbor came out and talked to me while I was doing mine, and he had no idea. So, anything we do to help get the word out, I think would help everybody.
I'll put it on my mediums as well. But, Redwood and Birch are areas, those secondary streets have just been pounded and they're just in really bad shape, so. All right, sorry, we had you up at the podium and then you had to take a detour back. Our apologies. Ms. Sensi with neighborhood service grant update, please.
We'll be quick. And if we don't want to do this on a monthly basis, we can do a quarterly or however you want to.
I think we might have to look into that seriously because
Okay.
of time.
Because we're running out of time, yeah. So I'll kind of keep it high overview. I did want to point out the emergency home repair program that Mr. Seaman was talking about with the laterals. That is probably our most frequent project is the sewer laterals, but it also will fund ADA retrofits to people's homes. We've done a lot of porch ramps. Our current projects is we have separating covered porch from a house. We have also done roofs and different HVACs, I think is another one that happens a lot. So it's truly emergency home repair for up to $5,000. About 60% of the city qualifies for that program. So it's a good deal to look in if you have an unexpected home expense. Also within our community development block grant, on schedule, we have 915 Jefferson. We expect an application from the Salvation Army to demolish the structure that's there. We're also working on reviewing the draft plan of our analysis of impediment to fair housing choice. That is a plan that's required by HUD every 5 years. Our CDBG disaster recovery. We did meet with the developers and their development team for Stronghold Landing and went through some of the zoning requirements and also some of the disaster recovery requirements and the communication with MHDP. So that project is actively working. The West Main Phase 2 architectural survey, we did get a grant extension as well as a few additional dollars. So we received an extra $2,900 to do some of the work that the ship over is requiring for that neighborhood survey. Also, the EMS facility is moving along nicely. State is currently still reviewing the environmental review for transformational housing. And council did approve the brush removal contract for MSP, and that will be paid for out of the Community Revitalization Fund. We also have the Mid-Missouri Solid Waste Management District grant that's helping us repair the Ripple glass bins. The Save-A-Lot bin has been completed. It is repaired, painted, and put back in place. And right now the Hyde Park glass recycling bin is currently in the shop. We did place a sign out to let folks know that there's other places that they can drop off their glass. But as soon as that comes back in, we'll go ahead and move the sign to the next location. We are also working on the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant that's due in April of 2024. That'll help establish a plan for energy efficiency and conservation strategy that will allow us access to other funding mechanisms that are in the bipartisan infrastructure law. As we've talked about already, the bridge investment program for the High Street Viaduct, working with Bartlett and West and Public Works on that project. And that is essentially all we have for this month. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
All right.
All right, item B, Mr. Bangy, project status update.
Yeah, so the chart that we had developed last month appears again with some updates on a couple of those projects. I could go through them if you wish, or otherwise, just let the report stand as it is.
Does anybody have any questions on the information that's provided? Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you very much.